Have you ever sat alone in a room, surrounded by absolute silence, and felt the weight of your own company pressing down on you like a heavy blanket? That feeling of emptiness, that void that seems to echo with every breath? I know it well, and I bet many of you do too. You see, we live in a world that's more connected than ever before, yet somehow we've never felt more alone. The irony doesn't escape me. Our phones buzz constantly with notifications. Our social media feeds overflow with updates, and yet something's missing, isn't it? Let me share something with you. Years ago, I found myself sitting in my living room on a Sunday afternoon. The house was quiet, too quiet. My marriage had ended. My children were with their mother, and for the first time in decades, I was truly alone. The silence was deafening. I remember looking at my phone, desperately scrolling through contacts, trying to find someone, anyone, to fill that void. But in that moment, something profound hit me. The desperation I felt wasn't really about being alone. It was about not knowing how to be alone. And there's a world of difference between those two things. You see, being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. Being alone is a physical state. Being lonely is a state of mind. And learning to be happy alone, that's not just a skill, it's an art. It's a journey of self-discovery that can transform your entire life. Think about it for a moment. Why do we feel this overwhelming need to constantly be surrounded by others? Why does the prospect of spending an evening alone fill so many of us with dread? We've been conditioned to believe that being alone equals being lonely. That silence equals emptiness. That solitude equals sadness. But what if I told you that learning to be happy alone is actually the key to being happy with others? What if I told you that the quiet moments you're running from hold the secrets to your greatest transformation? There's a beautiful paradox in this journey. The more comfortable you become with solitude, the more you realize you're never truly alone. Because within that solitude, you begin to discover parts of yourself you never knew existed. You begin to hear your own inner voice. Not the voice of your parents, your friends, your society, but your authentic self. Let's talk about fear for a moment. Fear of being alone is one of humanity's most primal fears. It's right up there with fear of death. Why? Because historically, being alone meant danger. It meant vulnerability. But we're not living in caves anymore, are we? Yet this ancient programming still runs deep in our self. The truth is, most of us have never learned how to be alone. From the moment we're born, we're surrounded by people. As children, we're constantly supervised. As teenagers, we're part of social groups. As adults, we move from relationship to relationship, job to job, always in the company of others. We've become so accustomed to external stimulation that we've forgotten how to simply be. But here's where it gets interesting. The ability to be happy alone isn't just about learning to tolerate solitude. It's about learning to thrive in it. It's about discovering that some of life's most profound moments happen in the quiet spaces between the... Think about nature for a moment. A seed doesn't sprout in constant motion. It needs stillness, it needs darkness, it needs solitude. And just like that seed, your greatest growth will often happen in moments of solitude. I want you to try something with me right now. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of your body in your chair. Notice the thoughts passing through your mind. Don't judge them, just observe them. This simple act of being present with yourself, this is where the journey begins. You see, learning to be happy alone isn't about filling the silence. It's about becoming comfortable with it. It's about understanding that you are complete, whole, and worthy, whether you're in a crowd of thousands or sitting by yourself on a quiet Sunday afternoon. When was the last time you intentionally spent time alone? Not alone while scrolling through social media, not alone while binge watching Netflix, but truly alone with your own thoughts, your own presence. Most people can't remember. And that's precisely the problem. We become so afraid of our own company that we'll do anything to avoid it. We'll stay in unfulfilling relationships, maintain toxic friendships, work excessive hours, anything to avoid facing ourselves. When you learn to be happy alone, you become free. Free from the need for constant validation. Free from the fear of abandonment. Free from the endless cycle of seeking happiness in others. Because you finally understand that happiness isn't something you find. It's something you cultivate from within. Think about the strongest trees in a forest. Do you know what makes them so strong? It's not just their size or age, it's their root system. And those roots grow deep, not in clusters, but in solitude. Each tree must establish its own foundation, its own connection to the earth. Your relationship with yourself is like that root system. It needs space, time, and solitude to grow strong. The journey to being happy alone begins with a simple understanding. You are not incomplete. You are not broken. You don't need fixing. You don't need completing. You are, at this very moment, whole and complete. Solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's the presence of self-connection. But I know what some of you are thinking. That sounds great in theory, but how do I actually do it? How do I learn to be happy alone when being alone feels so uncomfortable? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore together. Because the path to finding happiness in solitude isn't a mysterious secret. It's a learnable skill. And like any skill, it can be developed, practiced, and mastered. Remember this. The quality of your life is directly proportional to your ability to be comfortable with yourself. When you learn to be happy alone, you stop making decisions based on fear of loneliness. You stop settling for less than you deserve. You start living authentically, purposefully, and in the next part of our journey together, we're going to dive deeper into the practical steps of cultivating this inner happiness. We'll explore the specific habits, mindsets, and practices that can transform your relationship with solitude. But for now, I want you to sit with this thought. What if the alone time you've been avoiding is actually the doorway to the life you've been seeking? You know what's fascinating about human beings? Our incredible ability to adapt. We can adjust to almost any situation, any environment, any circumstance, except it seems to being alone with ourselves. Isn't that remarkable? We can climb mountains, explore ocean depths, even venture into space, but sitting quietly with our own thoughts. That feels like the greatest challenge of all. But discomfort you feel when you're alone isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that something's changing. It's like exercising a muscle you've never used before. Of course, it feels uncomfortable at first. Of course, it feels strange. Of course, it might even feel a little painful. But that discomfort, that's where the growth happens. Let me share something profound with you. Every single person in this room has an internal compass. It's that quiet voice inside that knows exactly what you need, what you want, what you're meant to do. But here's the catch. You can only hear that voice in moments of solitude. When you're constantly surrounded by noise, by people, by distractions, that voice gets drowned out. Think about water for a moment. When water is turbulent, stirred up, you can't see through it. But when water is still, it becomes crystal clear. Your mind works the same way. In solitude, when all the external noise settles, clarity emerges. But we resist this stillness, don't we? We fill every moment with noise, with activity, with distraction. We've convinced ourselves that being busy means being important, that being connected means being loved, that being surrounded means being fulfilled. Have you ever noticed how some of the most profound moments in your life happen when you were alone? That moment of clarity during a quiet walk, that sudden insight while sitting in silence, that deep sense of peace while watching a sunset. These aren't coincidences. These are glimpses of what's possible when you learn to embrace solitude. You see, being happy alone isn't about learning to tolerate emptiness. It's about discovering the fullness that already exists within you. It's about understanding that you are not just enough. You are abundance itself. Every answer you're seeking, every validation you're craving, every comfort you're pursuing, it all exists within you. But I hear you asking, how? How do I access this inner abundance? How do I find this mythical happiness in solitude? Well, let me tell you, it starts with a simple but powerful shift in perspective. Instead of seeing alone time as something to endure, start seeing it as something to explore. Think of yourself as an archaeologist of your own inner world. Every moment of solitude is an opportunity to uncover something new about yourself, to dig deeper into your own wisdom, to discover hidden treasures within. You know, what's interesting, when you start this journey, you begin to notice something remarkable. The qualities you've been seeking in others, security, validation, entertainment, comfort, they start emerging from within you. It's like discovering you've been carrying a diamond in your pocket all along. but you've been too busy looking for pebbles on the ground to notice it. Let's talk about fear again for a moment, because fear is often what keeps us from embracing solitude. We're afraid of what we might find when we're alone with our thoughts. We're afraid of the emotions that might surface. We're afraid of the silence. We're afraid of the truths we might have to face. Those fears are like guard dogs protecting a treasure. They look fierce, they sound dangerous, but they're actually guiding you towards something precious. Every fear you face in solitude is a doorway to greater self-understanding. Think about this. Every great spiritual teacher, every profound philosopher, every revolutionary thinker throughout history had one thing in common. They understood the power of solitude. They knew that true wisdom, true insight, true transformation doesn't happen in the noise. It happens in the quiet. But I'm not suggesting you need to become a hermit or retreat to a mountain cave. This isn't about isolating yourself from the world. It's about building a relationship with yourself that's so strong, so nurturing, so complete that your connections with others become choices rather than necessities. When you learn to be happy alone, something magical happens. Your relationships transform. Why? Because you're no longer approaching them from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone to share your completeness with. Think about the ocean for a moment. Surface can be turbulent, with waves crashing and wind howling. But dive deep enough and you'll find absolute stillness. Your inner world is like that ocean. The surface might be choppy with thoughts, emotions, and fears, but deeper down, there's a stillness that's always there, always accessible. This is what learning to be happy alone is really about. It's about diving beneath the surface chaos to find that inner stillness. It's about discovering that you are the ocean, not just the waves. It's about understanding that aloneness isn't emptiness. It's fullness waiting to be discovered. As you develop this relationship with yourself, you start noticing things you never noticed before. Colors seem brighter, music sounds richer, food tastes better. Why? Because you're finally fully present. You're not constantly seeking distraction or escape. You're here now experiencing life in its fullness. Remember this? The world is full of people who are afraid to be alone. That's why we have so many unhappy relationships, so many unfulfilling friendships, so many empty connections. But when you learn to be happy alone, you break free from this cycle. You become discerning about your connections. You choose relationships that enhance your life rather than fill a void. In the silence of solitude, you begin to hear the whispers of your own wisdom. In the stillness of aloneness, you begin to feel the stirrings of your own power. In the quiet of your own company, you begin to discover the vastness of your own potential. Think about this. Every seed needs darkness before it can grow toward the light. Every butterfly needs the solitude of its cocoon before it can spread its wings. Every great symphony has moments of silence that make the music more powerful. Your journey of learning to be happy alone is like that. It's the essential foundation for everything else in your life to flourish. You know what I find fascinating? The way society has taught us to view being alone as some kind of failure. As if spending a Friday night by yourself somehow means you're less valuable, less loved, less successful. But let me ask you this. Who wrote these rules? Who decided that your worth is measured by how many people surround you at any given moment? The truth is, we've been sold a story that says you need constant companionship to be complete. A story that says solitude equals loneliness. A story that says being alone means something's wrong with you. But today, right here, right now, we're going to write a new story. Think about the most peaceful moments in your life. Really think about them. More often than not, these moments happened when you were alone, didn't they? That early morning when you watched the sunrise and felt completely at peace. That quiet evening when you felt perfectly content with a book and a cup of tea. That moment when you achieved something personal and felt deeply proud of yourself. These moments aren't accidents. They're glimpses of your natural state. They're reminders of who you really are when you strip away all the social conditioning, all the expectations, all the shoulds and musts that society has piled upon you. Let me share something powerful with you. Every great achievement in human history started with someone willing to be alone with their thoughts. Every masterpiece, every invention, Every breakthrough began in solitude, because it's in solitude that we hear our own voice most clearly. It's in solitude that our creativity flows most freely. It's in solitude that our intuition speaks most loudly. But here's where most people get stuck. They confuse being physically alone with being emotionally alone. They confuse solitude with isolation. They confuse independence with disconnection. These are entirely different things. True solitude, the kind that nurtures your soul and feeds your spirit, isn't about building walls. It's about building foundations. It's not about shutting people out. It's about developing such a strong sense of self that you can think about a tree for a moment. A tree doesn't need other trees to survive. It grows on its own, reaches for the sun on its own, develops its own root system. Yet trees also form communities, share resources, communicate in their own way. But here's the key. They do this from a place of self-sufficiency, not dependency. That's what learning to be happy alone is really about. It's about developing your own root system. It's about becoming so grounded in who you are that you can weather any storm life throws at you. It's about building such a rich inner life that you never feel empty, even when you're by yourself. You see, when you truly learn to be happy alone, something remarkable happens. You stop making decisions based on fear of loneliness and start making decisions based on what truly aligns with your values. You stop accepting relationships that drain you and start cultivating connections that inspire you. You stop filling your calendar to avoid being alone and start protecting your solitude as sacred time. But let me be clear about something. This journey isn't about becoming a loner. It's not about isolating yourself from the world. It's about developing such a strong relationship with yourself that all your other relationships become choices rather than necessities. It's about becoming so complete within yourself that others complement your life rather than complete it. The more comfortable you become with being alone, the better your relationships with others become. Why? Because you're no longer approaching relationships from a place of need or desperation. You're approaching them from a place of wholeness, of choice, of genuine desire to connect rather than fear of being alone. Let me share a profound truth with you. The quality of your life is directly proportional to your ability to be comfortable with yourself. When you're comfortable being alone, you make better decisions. You choose better partners. You pursue more meaningful goals. You live more authentically. But here's something even more powerful. When you learn to be happy alone, you discover that you're never really alone at all, because you finally understand that companionship isn't just about having someone physically present. It's about being present with yourself, about being your own best friend, about having such a rich inner life that solitude becomes a pleasure rather than a punishment. Think about the ocean again. Surface might be choppy, filled with waves and turbulence, but dive deep enough and you'll find absolute stillness. Your relationship with yourself is like that. On the surface, there might be thoughts, emotions, fears. But when you learn to dive deep within yourself, you discover a stillness that's always there, always accessible. This is what true self-reliance looks like. It's not about never needing anyone. It's about not being dependent on others for your happiness, your sense of worth, your feeling of completeness. It's about understanding that while connections with others are beautiful and enriching, they're not the source of your happiness. They're the expression of it. You know what's beautiful about this journey? The more you embrace being alone, the more you realize you're never truly lonely. Because loneliness isn't about being physically alone. It's about feeling disconnected from yourself. When you're truly connected to yourself, you could be in the middle of a desert and feel completely at peace. What would your life look like if you were completely comfortable being alone? How would your decisions be different? How would your relationships change? How would your daily choices shift? These aren't just rhetorical questions. They're invitations to imagine a new way of being. Learning to be happy alone isn't just about being comfortable with solitude. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about understanding that you don't need external validation to feel worthy. It's about recognizing that the peace you're seeking, the love you're craving, the acceptance you're yearning for, it all begins with your relationship with yourself. Think about this. Every great love story you've ever heard about actually begins with self-love. Every tale of transformation starts with self-acceptance. Every journey of discovery begins with self-exploration. Your journey to being happy alone is all of these stories wrapped into one. It's a love story, a transformation story, and a discovery story, all centered around the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. You know what's remarkable about transformation? It often happens in the quietest moments. Those moments when you're alone, when the world is still, when you can finally hear your own thoughts clearly. These are the moments that change everything. Let me share something powerful with you. Every time you choose to embrace solitude instead of running from it, you're building emotional muscle. Every time you sit with your own thoughts instead of drowning them out with noise, you're growing stronger. Every time you choose to be alone instead of settling for shallow company, you're evolving. Think about diamonds for a moment. Do you know how they're formed? Under intense pressure, in complete darkness, in absolute solitude. Your journey to finding happiness alone is similar. The pressure you feel when you're alone, that's transformation happening. The darkness of uncertainty, that's wisdom growing. The solitude you're afraid of, that's strength building. But here's where it gets interesting. When you truly start embracing solitude, you begin to notice something extraordinary. The world starts responding to you differently. Why? Because you're different. You're no longer moving through life with an energy of need, of desperation, of incompleteness. You're moving through life with an energy of wholeness, of peace, of self-containment. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have a magnetic quality about them? How they seem completely at ease, whether they're in a crowd or by themselves? That's not an accident. That's not luck. That's the natural result of being comfortable in your own skin, of being at peace with your own company, of being complete within yourself. You see, when you learn to be happy alone, you develop what I call emotional sovereignty. This means your happiness is no longer dependent on external circumstances. It's no longer at the mercy of other people's actions or presence. It becomes an internal wellspring that you can access at any time, in any place. Think about the sky for a moment. Clouds come and go. Storms pass through. But the sky itself remains unchanged, undisturbed, ever present. Your inner peace, your happiness, your sense of completeness. They're like that. People may come and go. Circumstances may change. But when you learn to be happy alone, your inner peace remains constant, unchanging, ever. But let me be clear about something. This journey isn't about becoming invulnerable. It's not about never needing anyone. It's about understanding that while connections with others are beautiful and enriching, they're not the source of your happiness or expressions of it. You know what's fascinating? When you truly learn to be happy alone, your capacity for genuine connection actually increases. Why? Because you're no longer trying to get something from others. You're not trying to fill a void. You're not trying to escape from yourself. Instead, you're sharing from your overflow, connecting from your wholeness, loving from your completeness. Think about a cup that's already full. When you pour more into it, it naturally overflows, sharing its abundance. That's what happens when you learn to be happy alone. Your cup becomes so full of self-love, self-acceptance, and inner peace that it naturally overflows into all your relationships. But here's the kiss. It doesn't come from constantly doing things. It doesn't come from achievements or acquisitions. It comes from being present with yourself, being comfortable in your own skin, being at peace with your own thoughts. Let me share something profound with you. The moments when you feel most alone are often the moments right before your greatest breakthrough. Why? Because these moments force you to go deeper within yourself. They force you to face what you've been avoiding. They force you to grow in ways you never thought possible. You see, learning to be happy alone isn't just about being comfortable with solitude. It's about discovering who you really are when there's no one else around to influence you, to shape you, to define you. It's about meeting yourself, maybe for the first time, without any filters, without any masks. Think about water again for a moment. When water is still, it becomes clear. When it's clear, it reflects perfectly. Your mind works the same way. In solitude, when all the external noise settles, your mind becomes clear. When it's clear, it reflects your true nature perfectly. The journey isn't linear. It's not like climbing a mountain where each step takes you closer to the top. It's more like exploring an ocean. Sometimes you'll find yourself in shallow waters, sometimes in deep waters. Sometimes the surface will be calm, sometimes stormy. But with each exploration, you're discovering more about yourself, about your capacity for peace, about your ability to be happy regardless of external circumstances. You know what's beautiful about this journey? The more you embrace being alone, the more you realize you're never truly lonely. Because loneliness isn't about being physically alone. It's about feeling disconnected from yourself. When you're truly connected to yourself, you could be in the middle of nowhere and feel completely at home. What would your life look like if your happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else? If you were so complete within yourself that relationships became choices rather than necessities. If you were so at peace with solitude that you never made decisions based on fear. These aren't just hypothetical questions. They're invitations to imagine a new way of being. They're invitations to step into a new level of emotional freedom. They're invitations to discover a kind of happiness that can't be taken away because it doesn't depend on anything outside of you. Every great journey of self-discovery has moments of solitude. Every profound transformation has periods of aloneness. Every significant growth has seasons of introspection. These aren't obstacles to overcome. They're essential ingredients for your evolution. When you truly understand this, something remarkable happens. The silence that once felt oppressive begins to feel nurturing. The solitude that once felt empty begins to feel rich. The aloneness that once felt like punishment begins to feel like a gift. Because you finally understand that being alone isn't about absence. It's about presence. Presence with yourself. Presence with your thoughts. Presence with your true nature. As we come to this final part of our journey together, I want you to think about something profound. Think about all the moments in your life when you felt truly, deeply alive. I'm willing to bet that many of those moments happened when you were alone. Not because being alone is better than being with others, but because in those moments of solitude, you were fully present, fully yourself. You see, we're reaching a crucial understanding here. Being happy alone isn't the end point. It's the beginning. It's the foundation upon which everything else in your life can flourish. It's the soil from which all your other relationships, achievements, and experiences can grow. Think about the greatest gift you could give to the world. Is it your constant availability? Your perpetual busyness? Your dependency on others for happiness? No. The greatest gift you can give is your wholeness, your completeness, your ability to stand strong in who you are, whether you're alone or in a crowd. Let me share something powerful with you. Every time you embrace solitude, instead of running from it, you're sending a message to the universe. You're saying, I trust myself. I value myself. I am. And when you send that message consistently, the universe responds in kind. Opportunities appear. Relationships deepen. Life opens up in ways you never imagined possible. When you learn to be happy alone, you develop what I call unshakable peace. This isn't the kind of peace that depends on everything going right. This is the kind of peace that remains steady even when everything seems to be going wrong. Why? Because it comes from within. It comes from your relationship with yourself. Think about an oak tree for a moment. When storms come, its branches may sway, its leaves may rustle, but its roots hold firm. Your happiness, when it's rooted in self-completeness, becomes like that oak tree. Circumstances may change, people may come and go, but your inner peace remains unshaken. You know what's remarkable? The moment you truly accept being alone, you discover you're never really alone at all, because you finally understand that aloneness isn't about isolation, it's about integration. It's about integrating all parts of yourself, embracing all aspects of your being, becoming whole and complete within yourself. What if the silence you've been running from is actually the teacher you've been seeking? What if the solitude you've been avoiding is actually the healing you've been needing? What if the aloneness you've been dreading is actually the freedom you've been craving? You see, true happiness, the kind that lasts, the kind that can't be taken away, isn't found in constant company. It's found in the quiet moments when you discover that you are enough. It's found in the peaceful moments when you realize that everything you've been seeking outside yourself has been within you all along. Think about water once more. A shallow pool reflects only the surface of things, but still, deep Water reflects the stars. Your relationship with yourself is like that. When it's shallow, based only on external validation and constant company, it reflects very little. But when it's deep, rooted in self-knowledge and comfort with solitude, it reflects the infinite. This journey we've been on together isn't just about learning to be happy alone. It's about discovering your own infinity. It's about understanding that within you lies an unlimited source of peace, joy. It's about realizing that you are not just a fragment seeking completion. You are completion itself. Let me share one final truth with you. The ability to be happy alone isn't just a skill. It's a superpower in a world that's constantly telling you that you need something outside yourself to be complete. Being content in your own company is revolutionary. In a society that equates being alone with being lonely, finding joy in solitude is radical self-love. Think about this. Every great spiritual teacher, every profound philosopher, every wise soul throughout history has pointed to the same truth. The kingdom of heaven is within. The peace you seek is within. The love you crave is within. The completion you desire is within. Learning to be happy alone is simply the process of discovering this truth through yourself. But remember this. This journey doesn't end here. It's not about reaching a destination where you never need anyone else. It's about reaching a place within yourself where your connections with others come from choice rather than necessity, from love rather than fear, from completeness rather than need. As you leave here today, I want you to carry this understanding with you. You are not incomplete. You are not broken. You are not missing anything. Everything you need for happiness is already within you. Your task is simply to remove the barriers that prevent you from experiencing. Let this be your meditate. In the quiet moments, in the alone times, in the spaces between the noise, that's where you'll find your true self. That's where you'll discover your innate completeness. That's where you'll realize that being alone isn't a punishment to endure, but a gift to embrace. When you learn to be happy alone, you're never really alone at all. You're in the company of your own wisdom, your own love, your own completeness. You're in the company of the entire universe that exists within you. So go forth with this new understanding. Embrace your solitude. Cherish your alone time. Dive deep into the ocean of your own being. Because when you truly learn to be happy alone, you become invincible. Not because you don't need anyone, but because you finally discovered that the love, peace, and happiness you've been seeking have been within you all along. Your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship in your life. Make it beautiful. Make it strong. Make it unshakable. Because when you're truly happy alone, you become capable of the deepest, most authentic connections with others. You become able to love not from need, but from abundance, to share not from emptiness, but from fullness, to connect not from fear, but from freedom. This is your moment. This is your journey. This is your transformation. And it all begins with the simple but profound decision to embrace your solitude, to cherish your alone time, to discover the incredible person you are when there's no one else around to influence who you should be. The world is waiting for the authentic you, the you that emerges when you're completely at peace with being alone, because that's when your true light shines brightest. That's when your true purpose unfolds naturally. That's when your true power emerges effortlessly. Go forth and shine that light. The world needs your wholeness, not your fear of being alone. The world needs your authenticity, not your desperate need for company. The world needs your true self, the self you discover when you finally learn to be happy alone. This is your time. This is your truth. This is your power. Embrace it. Live it. Be it. Because when you learn to be happy alone, you become truly unstoppable. Not because you don't need anyone, but because you finally discovered that you are already complete, already whole, already enough. Now you know the truth. The happiness you seek isn't out there somewhere. It's right here within you, waiting to be discovered in the sacred silence of your own company.